welcome to another episode of The Floor is Yours. Today we have four speakers here in a 2v2 debate. We have two judges today. We have Ryan and Nishan. Thank you for the two of you for joining us. I will be your moderator for today. Our speakers today are Ayush Agarwal, Ayan Basu, Praneet Sinha, and Ainish Dutt. Our motion for today is this house would allow prisoners to choose death over their life sentences. In the proposition, we have Ayush Agarwal and Ayan Basu. Inside proposition, we have Praneet Sinha as well as Ainish Dutt. We'll be starting the debate off with side proposition, of course. Kicking the debate off for them is Ayan Basu. Ayan, are you ready?
Am I audible?
Yes, you are both audible and visible. You may begin.
Gentlemen, we stand here today to debate the motion that the House would allow prisoners to choose death over a life sentence. Now, in case of a life sentence, what essentially happens after one is that the person is released, but the fact that they have been imprisoned is permanently recorded in their record as a citizen of that country. Now, we can clearly understand that after this life sentence, a person's life is essentially ruined. And it's made near impossible for them to get back into their normal livelihood as before they were imprisoned. This is because that mark I mentioned on the person's character profile as a citizen of that country essentially jeopardizes their access to any form of livelihood. They're therefore unemployed for most of their life, which severely reduces the quality of said life. A good example would be the United States. A person called Javier Alvarez, after his first month out, got a job scrubbing toilets for $3 a month. After that, he applied, according to his estimate, for 80 other jobs, all of which were from all of which he was promptly rejected because of his criminal record. Now, in such a situation, I might be asked, how does this justify allowing the convict to choose death? This is because this existence, this life after prison, essentially pushes them further towards going back to their criminal life. This essentially endangers society by putting them back, by making them a criminal again, and making it impossible for them to earn their livelihood decently. And it also negatively affects their life and their psyche, in that they're not able to earn, they're not able to afford the basic necessities of life, and are therefore distraught and dismayed. If they're allowed to choose death over this life sentence, then what we are allowing them to do is to end their existence then and there, instead of waiting for 14 years or longer, knowing that in the end they'll be worse off than they were in prison. If they choose death, they're being allowed to be free, to let go, and to potentially not face potentially not face the severe repercussions,
Right.
for the
Wrap
lack
up,
of a better
Ayan.
word, concluding statements,
Yeah.
for the lack of a better word, of life after prison. Thank you very much.
Right. With that, that is your 3 minutes, Ayan. Thank you for your speech. We will now be taking one question from us from the other side. We'll take the question from Praneet. However, I must put out a note to all the speakers that there will be a question answer session towards the end of the debate, because this is a standard 2v2 and we will have an increasing amount of time towards the end of the debate. That in mind, Praneet, why don't you move ahead with your question?
Sir, since the majority of your speech was focused on what would happen to the prisoner after he is released from his sentence, can I get your understanding of what a life sentence is and what happens in the majority of cases when someone gets a life sentence?
A life sentence generally extends, to the best of my knowledge, for 14 years or slightly longer. In some cases, yes, the person is incarcerated for way too long for them to be alive, but in most cases, they're released after a length of around 14 or 21 years, after which they have to essentially continue, they're expected to continue their life as was. I hope that answers your question.
Hopefully it does. Thank you for the question, Praneeth, and thank you for the response, Ayon. Ishan
I
or
I
Ryan?
probably say something.
Yeah.
Okay, Oyon, if I could have your video. Yeah. Okay. Considering the fact that you are factually correct on life sentences. I agree. You're talking about the people who get out on a parole, but talking about the implicit and the explicit spirit of today's motion, which is life sentence versus death. A life sentence is when a person stays in jail for his entire life potentially. So in that essence, now would you care to elaborate? I'll give you 1 minute. Your speech was heavily focused on what a person does after he's released. But in the true essence of today's motion, a life sentence versus death, could you please emphasize on why you would rather give a prisoner the choice to choose death, or on those particular lines? Why should a prisoner be given the choice to choose their own death?
Right. Ayon, you have a
Am I
minute.
audible?
Yes, you are audible. You have a minute. You may begin.
Uh, when the prisoner learns that they have been sentenced for life, they've been sentenced to imprisonment, incarceration for life, they are essentially aware that after waiting for so many years, they will be released into this life where it becomes exceptionally difficult for them to relive, to go back to their existing normal life, to go back to their existing normal way of life. In such a scenario, there can be major psychological repercussions, because they know that after being imprisoned for 14 years or 21 years, when I go back out, it's not going to get any better. It's potentially going to get worse. So if they're given a choice, if they're given that choice to end their life then and there, then at least they know that now it's done, it's over, and I won't have to go back to something worse than imprisonment after a month.
Right. With a pinpoint ending, thank you for the justification, Ayon. Ishan, I hope that answered it. Uh, and with that, Ryan, do you have a question or shall we move on?
Um, I just have a small clarification. It's a very, I mean, it's very moral. It's a moral question of sorts for Ion. Ion, you said that there are major psychological repercussions, that the person was earning a lot less, that he was not given his dignity even after serving the sentence. But don't you think that we as human beings have this intrinsic desire for survival against all odds and resilience? These are very moral concepts, but resilience and an intrinsic desire for survival, do you think that should also be factored in when you're talking about psychological repercussions?
The desire for survival certainly exists, but to survive and to exist as a living being, is it my question is the question I am talking about here is it truly worth continuing to live if my life is not it does not meet the minimum basic requirements of a fulfilling life? I'm not talking about a very lavish lifestyle, certainly not, but the basic the basic needs of employment, the basic needs of food, clothing, and shelter. If that is not ensured, in fact, it's not only not ensured, it is after a life sentence, it's more like it's likelier that you won't get these facilities. Is it really worth surviving in such a scenario? It is. I don't believe it is, and that's how I stand here.
Okay, right.
Right. Fair enough. Thank you, Ion. Thank you, Ion, for answering Ryan's question. Ryan, I hope it did answer it. That being said, we will now move on to the next speaker for today's debate. We will move on to side proposition represented, who will, and for them, their debate will be kicked off by Ainish Dutt. Ainish, are you with us?
Yes, I am. And side opposition, just to clarify.
Yeah, side opposition. My apologies. That was a slip of tongue. Anish, you have 3 minutes on the clock, like all the others have and will have. You may begin.
Right. Very good evening to everyone present. Now, I want to start off by explaining the prison system and the punishment system, to be exact. When crimes are committed, depending on the severity of the crime, a court sentences the offender to prison. Prison can be rehabilitative, or prison can be a punishment. Now, small crimes and petty crimes such as theft, you are rehabilitated in prison. But when you commit a crime like murder or rape, the entire purpose of keeping you in prison is to shield you off from society. Now, Oyon's main argument was that once out of prison after a life sentence, which is absurd because in India, according to a 2012 landmark decision, the Supreme Court upheld that a life sentence meant life in prison, where a prisoner's life is forfeit at death and he spends his last days in prison. So coming back to that, Oyon's entire argument was when a human being has no access to food, clothing, shelter, or roti kapra makan, he chooses to die, and it is better to die. But understand that in prison, prisoners are provided with food, shelter, and clothing and basic amenities. The entire purpose of a prison where people have received life sentences is to shield them off from society. Where such people deemed too heinous to be let loose onto society again, spend the rest of their lives confined to that prison. Now, the second prong of my argument is that when somebody allows the state, gives consent to the state to end a life, it is only giving more power to an already powerful institution. An ideal state should not have the power to end another human's life with consent or without consent. Now, understand that how this can lead to a gateway. Understand that we have mental health programs as well. When a prisoner consents to his own life being taken away, it's basically assisted suicide. Now, once this happens, proponents of the ideas that why don't we let depressed people kill themselves, or why don't we allow state-sponsored suicide as it is? That way, with the amount of depression cases skyrocketing and coming to light in this 21st century, a huge number of suicides will peak and now by definition be legal. So understand that how allowing the state to take away a life leads into a gateway of a severe loss of life, which is not needed in a society, which is not needed in any society at any point in time. So my main arguments are that people who receive life sentences normally commit the most heinous crimes and cannot be let back out into society. But while being shielded from society, they are provided with the basic amenities. They are provided with basic amenities
Right,
to
I need
life,
to wrap up.
clothing, and giving too much power to the already all-powerful state.
Right. With that has been your 3 minutes, Anish. Thank you for your speech. We will now be taking questions upon his speech if there are any. Are there any from our participants today? Right. Seeing as interestingly there are none, we will move on to questions upon questions from either Ryan or Ishan. Do either of you have questions? Ishan or Ryan?
Ryan, you want to go ahead?
Do you have a question?
Do you have one?
Yeah, I kind of have one.
Yeah, cool. You go ahead.
Right. So this is drifting a little, but if we trace the history of criminology, we can see how from a public spectacle of execution, we have moved towards a more guarded policy where the person where the murderer or rapist, as you put it, uh, he or she has been shielded from view. Like it's almost like they have disappeared from view, right? So, do you think that executions grant the state more power than the life sentence? Or would you like to clarify? Or do you want me to rephrase? This is a
Again,
simple question.
while my argument was basic, while the majority of the first part of my argument was, and I agree, depended upon the fact that these people are kept away from society. Understand that while they're kept away from society, they're given a very basic life: food, clothing, shelter. That is it. Wake up, same existential nightmare over and over again. While there is no physical or psychological harm, you're only bored and you're cut off from society. You are treated as a caged animal. And while this might seem wrong, it fits the punishment for something as heinous as a murder or rape. You are not being killed because no state or person should have the power over someone else's to end someone else's life. But you are a threat to society and need to be kept away from such. And you are not, and you should not be entitled to most of the privileges society gets. That's the entirety of my argument. Having privileges taken away and leading a very basic life, and for the last few days of your life.
Right.
I have a question.
Right. First off, thank you for answering that question, Anish. I hope that answered your question, Ryan. Yes, Ishan, please go ahead.
Anish, you keep mentioning the fact that the state should not have the power to take away lives. The state should not have the power to take away lives. But understand, we are intricately giving the prisoner the choice to take away his own life, right? It is the prisoner's choice to either either ask for death or commit to the life sentence, right? Number one, that if you would give me a justification as to how you bring in the state's angle. And number two, if that is a justification, then how do you draw the parallel to think about euthanasia, right? Think about euthanasia and give me a justification. If that was the case, then why would patients be given actually the right to choose their own death? Do you think that maybe not in all cases, but in some cases, prisoners should be allowed to choose their death? Or do you propagate the fact that in no cases should they be allowed to choose their death?
All right, fine. To give my answer short, no. Prisoners should not be allowed to choose death in any, because see, while you are choosing death, the person executing you is the state. So by default, by proxy, you're giving the state the power to kill you. It is death by consent from the state. So in the end, term it what you may. It's the state who's killing you. So the state indirectly gets the power to take away a human's life, be it with consent or without consent. So, and I do not believe in the death penalty at all. So I believe that the state should never have the power to execute any.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
just
Okay.
just a clarification.
Yeah, go ahead, Ishan.
Yeah, person X says, I want to die. Person X does not have any means to die. So person Y takes on the responsibility to kill person X. So you are saying implicitly it is Y who is being given the power to kill and completely negating consent here. It is not the state's, it is not the state's, it is not being fostered by the state. It is being fostered by the prisoner. You need to make the clear distinction. Let's think of euthanasia. It is the patient who is choosing to die or to live, right?
But again, who's doing the killing? Who's doing the killing? Again, the state.
Okay.
Yeah,
fine.
we won't spend
Fine,
much time
we-
over the question.
State should not be allowed to kill.
We'll have a question answer now. We'll have a
Okay.
question answer.
So just a simple last clarification so that I can understand your viewpoint. State has the power to kill. State has the power to imprison you for life. So in your hierarchical setup, the power to kill is beneath the power to imprison you for life. Or is it the opposite?
The power to kill is above everything because you're ending a person's life. You're
So the power to
from existing.
Okay, so the power to make a person be surveillance in a surveillance setup for the rest of his life, to guard him from society, him or her, is lesser than
Bad society
instant
fuck
death.
him up.
Okay,
Bad society.
okay, perfect. Got your
Right. Fair enough. How the tables have turned from no questions to too many questions. We shall return to the end of the debate for another question for the question answer session. So we may Ishan and Ryan can clarify what they have to later, and of course so can the participants if they have questions by then. That in mind, we shall now move on to the next speaker of today's debate. We have Ayush Agarwal. It is his first time on the debate. Welcome, Ayush. He too will have 3 minutes, 3 minutes on the clock, wrapping it up for the proposition. Ayush, you have the floor for the next 3 minutes.
Yeah, so hello. So today I'm going to talk about that have life sentences. These so-called lifers tend to be serious problems for the prison staff because every freedom has been taken away from them, and there is no way for them to regain that unless it's by parole, which is very common to be denied to a person that's serving a life sentence. This means that the staff have limited bargaining power in working with the individual. The lack of communication and respect. This means that these lifers seek to regain some of that control in other ways. They do this by organizing, participating, and running gangs within prisons. This allows them to have the ability to have some sort of control of their environment, some sort of malicious control. They do. These gangs can cause severe problems for prisons and the services in prisons, making it much harder to keep control of the rehabilitation. And this makes it seriously difficult due to the fact that the staff have to try and earn respect and open communication with the individual who is within the influence of the gang, and either fears for their safety or respects the gang more. This also leads to high corruption in prison guards, which may join the gangs or do favors for the gangs. I'm not trying to claim that we can solve all the gang issues within prisons, but we can severely disrupt the process. Here's how this would work. In many cases where people have exhausted their appeals, I believe they would have to ask the option for death, and at least some of this through suicide, because to spend an untold number of years in prisons is certainly torture. As we know, prison is meant for rehabilitation and not punishment. This channel of dialogue opened by the prisoner and would force him to talk with medical staff and rehabilitative staff, not about about their problems and options. This is something that currently does not happen because all the appeals are exhausted and their fear is for no other hope. With this dialogue, there is some sort of hope of regaining respect and getting the prisoner to be able to actually feel remorse for the crime they have committed. This is important to many victims who feel it is the only punishment that is worth something, allowing them to have the closure of seeing their oppressor die. This communication and chance for rehabilitation to be effective, even for lifers, means that the prisoner will have hope of feeling in control and will be less likely to persuade, join a gang in the first place. The option of death should be allowed the option of death should be allowed, and the opportunity which is acceptable as the judge has deemed the crime so terrible that the person is not safe to be released back to society any other day. Their minds are so miscontorted and tortured that they will eventually turn back to their previous life, and thus in the moment of themselves they know their mistake and they know that they will never be the same again, and they choose to have assisted suicide or euthanasia. I rest my case. Thank you very much.
Right, fair enough. Thank you for that speech, Ayush. With the pinpoint ending to it, we shall now move to the participants and the judges for questions. Seeing as Praneeth was the first one to ask a question, we shall now move on to Ainish, and then we shall move back to the judges. Ainish, why don't you go ahead?
Right. So your argument was that a prisoner choosing death would spare him from a life of horror, of the horrors we know that go down in prison, such as the gang culture, the drug culture, beating up, getting hazed, police, prison, warden brutality. Then then a lot of these already end in suicide. So would there be any difference if a prisoner chooses one day to slit his wrists in prison rather than the state using more rather than isn't it better that this prisoner kills himself rather than giving the state already more power to kill another human life?
By a prisoner asking the state to kill him, he's not giving the state power. He's simply pleading to the state for his life to be ended in a peaceful manner, so that he does not have to do it himself in prison. I personally feel that's a much better way than to die in a whole prison cell with prisoners around you, with no privacy. Wouldn't you rather die with no pain and in peace? than by slitting your wrists.
Clarification for pertinent follow-up.
Right. We will grant that only if the judges do.
This is not an MUN though. You can write it down. You can ask it during the question answer session.
Right, fair enough. You may also try to follow up your question in the question answer session, which will be coming up right after this next speech. So keeping that in mind, before we move on to the next speech, we shall take questions. We shall take questions from Ryan or Ishan if they have one, and then move on from there.
Do you have a question, Ishan?
I do. A short and cute question. Okay. So if prisoners are allowed to choose their deaths, what you are first saying today, where exactly does the judiciary stand in a state? Where does the judiciary stand if a prisoner is given the right to choose whether he or she wants to die?
Right, Ayush, your response?
Repeat your question.
Okay.
His simple question. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
No, sorry.
Right. His simple question was, firstly, you're aware of what the judiciary is, right? His question was, where your basic argument was the prisoner should be allowed to choose whether or not he fills out his life sentence or whether he can choose whether he can die earlier on. He can choose to have his life taken away. He is asking you, where in this whole triangle does the judiciary stand? What does that say about the judiciary?
So basically, what I was trying to say was a prisoner simply asked the judiciary after being sentenced to a life sentence that could his life be taken away, rather than him serving a life sentence, chooses to have the state kill him.
Right. Just to clarify for Ishan, what you mean to say is they should make a plea to the judiciary saying that that they want their life to be taken, or they must demand
to
that it
the
is taken.
judiciary or a plea to the state?
Yeah.
A plea to the judiciary.
Right, fair enough. That is his answer. You may, Ishan or Ryan, you may also follow up in the question answer session. With that, thank you for your time, Ayush. We shall now move on to a final speech of today's debate, which is from our last opposition speaker, wrapping it up for them and the debate, Praneeth Sinha. Praneeth has been back on this debate after quite some time, so welcome back, Praneeth.
Thank you.
Right. So with that, for the final time in this debate, you have 3 minutes on the clock. The floor is yours.
Right. So today's proposition failed to essentially fill their burden here, which was to prove that the value of allowing prisoners this sort of choice between death and a life sentence was provided significant advantages to all the stakeholders involved, including the prisoners, the legal system at large, society as a whole. Right. Instead of this, they relied on their own personal characterizations of what life in a prison or outside of a prison looks like. So I'm going to respond to those first and dismantle them one by one. Firstly, let's focus on the first proposition's speech, right? They talked about how, say, in the case of parole, after you get released from prison, you have a restriction on your ability to gain employment, right? Please understand that this is not particularly the case when you have programs for the rehabilitation of ex-convicts and for allowing them to join back into the economic system, right? There is a federal office in the United States, at least. There's a federal office for correctional training and employment for ex-convicts, right? So numerically, on the whole, the number of prisoners released on parole will who do not gain employment will be less than those who do because of the programs in place. Furthermore, yeah, that was mainly the argument you pointed out there. There's no really other response I can give to that. Moving on to the second proposition leader's speech, when you talked about how prisoners form gangs within prison, right? And these gangs are sort of like, these powerful cults inside prison that can intimidate prison guards or have their way as they please. Please understand that this is more or less, from what I feel, based on a kind of media propagated or, the kind of depiction of prison life you see in Hollywood movies and such. What I believe of prisons are places with libraries, places where prisoners, stay in their cells most of the time rather than roaming around beating up prison guards, right? These prisons are places that allow an opportunity to these prisoners who usually come from very poor backgrounds, who've never stepped into a library in the first place, to have some sort of rehabilitatory experience there. So moving on to some constructives, I'm going to talk about why the convict isn't usually the best person to choose his punishment, right? And the reason for this is because at the time of sentencing, the convict's mental state is usually scattered. He's despondent. He's not very well suited to deal with the kind of sentence that's being given to him, which is a life sentence. It's very stressful for him, right? Hence, the kind of rational choice involved here is negated. Secondly, we're going to talk about the value of punishment and why a life sentence works better for society as a whole. It's because during this time, first of all, society benefits from that prison labor. That prison labor is going towards it's that prison labor is going towards reconciling the harms or the wrongs that prisoner did. It's going towards negating or canceling the thing, not canceling exactly, but it's a good to counter the harms that he's done. Furthermore, while he's in prison, there is an opportunity for evidence to come up which may reverse his term, since judiciaries can get that sentence wrong, right? Thus, if he chooses life sentence over choosing death, he has an ability to gain out of the prison term rather than parole, like be unsentenced.
Right. Fair enough. Thank you for your speech, Praneeth. Judges do note that Ainish has exceeded his time bar by 26 seconds. That in mind, we shall now move on to questions.
Ainish
or Praneeth?
Sorry, my apologies, Praneeth. My apologies. That was a slip of tongue. Right. I was a bit thrown off by when he was referring to Ainish's speech. That in mind, we shall now move on to questions on Praneeth's speech. We shall take one from the participants and then move on to the judges. Are there any at all? Once again, interestingly, as there are none, we shall move on to the judges. Ryan or Ishan, could you save the day?
Just a small clarification. In your setup, does the convict get to make the choice, or does the lawyer who's arguing on behalf of the convict get to make the choice or have the final statements after conferring with the person on trial?
The lawyer does after discussing with the convict.
And you still stand with the statement that the mental state would affect any rational choice?
Yes, because the ability of the convict to
reason.
Yeah, in spite of what the lawyer is telling him, try to still push for death because he believes for him it's better than a life sentence.
Right. Fair enough. Thank you for the answer, Praneeth. Hope that answered your question, Ryan. Ishan, do you have anything?
Okay. I mean, okay, Praneeth, thank you for your speech, first of all. But today, prisons have some purpose, right? The main purposes of a prison are incapacitation, deterrence from crimes, etc. Now, tell me, what better would be a deterrent from preventing future crimes in a particular society than death? Because what are you potentially doing to that prisoner with a life sentence? You are allowing him to rot in a prison wherein he's being made big promises of rehabilitation, but we can look at the situation of jails in India, Tihar jail, this jail, that. It is not a situation of rehabilitation, right? What is a better deterrent than death when you are potentially keeping that person lifelong in a particular jail? What is the purpose?
Yeah, especially from the point of view of the state.
And pardon the music, it's Lakshmi Puja song.
Yeah. So from the state's point of utility, to prevent recidivism or the rate of if the person is to commit a crime again after getting out. From the state's point of view, if I might add, if you treat that as a separate question, then it's fine. State's point of view, doesn't it have more utility to have the person not exist anymore?
Yeah, but see, even if you consider that it provides greater utility to the state, if you can't counter all the harms that, say, greater, conviction by under trial has, or the harms that wrong convictions has, then your utility is essentially useless, right? Because you're convicting people who might have not committed the crime in the first place. Second of all, from the state's point of view, if you're providing that choice, I don't really see I don't really see how the choice in itself would be a deterrent to a crime, right? Because either way, that essentially boils it down to saying that a death penalty is a deterrent, right? So since a death penalty already exists as a deterrent, I don't see how offering this choice could provide greater,
Yeah,
advantage to the state in terms of death,
yeah, got it.
deterrence.
Right. Fair enough. Thank you for your response, Praneeth. With that, we have come to an end of the primary section of today's debate, and we will now move on to the second part of it, which is the question answers section. This is where the judges, as well as you, the participants, are allowed to cross question each of the sides and respond as a team and not individuals. Herein, we will allow any amount of questions from both sides to the other, and in order to make sure that both the arguments have been refuted and questioned at the same time, allowing for a more fair and well-rounded debate. So we shall start off with side proposition. If you have any questions to side opposition, you may feel free to ask them. Any rebuttals that you may have to their points, or any other clarifications on their speeches that you would like the judges to be made aware of, you may do so now. So side proposition, is there anything you would like to say? Right. Is there nothing from either participant? Fair enough. We shall move on to side opposition.
Right, I have a just
Right,
a second. If the proposition does
Right.
not have any statements to make, we can clarify, right?
Yeah. You guys can ask questions at any point of time.
Right.
In order to make sure you can mark adequately.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Okay, so a very simple question to Ayun and Ayush. If the state cannot give life, can the state take away life? Very simple analysis. Today,
May I answer?
yeah, okay, if you got the question, absolutely. Go ahead.
Oh, just a
No.
second. Have you read The Bet? It was in your syllabus. By Anton Chekhov.
No, it's not in my syllabus.
Oh,
Not
okay. The
in
syllabus
11th.
might have changed.
What
Anyway,
is going on?
similar themes were dealt with in that story. You can go on.
I'm right, but coming back, no, I don't think the state should have any rights related to the termination of anyone's life. But in this case, where I would counter the opposition is saying that when the person themselves choose to die, for example, assisted suicide or euthanasia, or in this case, choosing the death penalty, it is not exactly giving the state the right to kill them. It is more appointing the state with their own consent, their executioner.
Right.
So today, right, the second clarification right here is another very important mechanism that follows with our presence today is retribution, right? It is for a reason that you are going to jail for punishment. Now, potentially, if you are committing assisted suicide or X, Y, Z, whatever, the same question I'm asking you again: where does the judiciary stand? Where does the police mechanism stand? Because there exists a robust mechanism of retribution. So tell me how the retributive system is failing, so that I
Right.
can understand better.
Ayush, do you have anything to add as well? We've heard Ion, and if there's anything you would like to add, or if Ion would like to go ahead with it, either of you may do so.
No, I'm good.
All right, fair enough. Go ahead, Ion.
Could you rephrase your question,
10
please?
on 10 answer, Ayush. 10 on 10. Yeah. Okay. The question is basically the purpose of a jail is also retribution, right? Punishment for a crime. Now the state is potentially putting you to jail. Why? Because it's wanting to punish you. Now, once you're saying you have the choice, you have the consent to die, where is the state standing? Where is the judiciary standing? And where is the police standing? Police mechanism. We have a robust retributive system in our country, in any country. You are potentially saying, okay, you can give me a life sentence, but after that, you can, whatever. Then I have the choice to die.
To simplify, Ion, to simplify what Ishan had to say, in case that was a bit too much of a ruckus over the music, he is simply asking you whether or not you believe that this is the perfect example that no one cares about the justice system, no one cares about the judiciary, when you're giving the prisoner the right to essentially bypass the system of the life sentence by saying, no, I don't want to carry out the sentence, just kill me. That is what he's asking. Is this fair? Is this right? What is your thought on this?
I think Ayush wants to answer because he has his hand.
Right. Ayush, go ahead if you have something.
So, Ishan, you mentioned that serving your life sentence provides retribution, and serving your life sentence is a form of punishment. Do you think that sending someone to prison should be punishment, or should it be rehabilitation? Do we punish criminals, or should we rehabilitate them? And I would like you to answer how. Where is the retribution? Where is the retribution in being a prisoner and serving a life sentence? Where is the retribution?
Right. So you want me to answer? Will you be marking me? I'm happy to answer.
I don't know.
The basic purpose of retribution is a deterrent factor. You are deterring someone from actually committing crime. You are incapacitating that person. You are removing that person from society, right? Then comes rehabilitation. Those are secondary factors. But if the proposition is done with their answer to my question, Ryan, if you have any question for the proposition, the opposition, if you have any question for the
so again,
proposition,
I asked this
and
question.
Suryansh, if Suryansh has a question for the proposition.
Wow. Okay, now I asked this question to Ainish, I think. So the proposition you're arguing that technically the death sentence and the life sentence are interchangeable. Like you equate them of sorts when you allow the prisoner to choose between life sentence and death sentence. Do you equate them? Because the opposition, Ainish argued that there's a hierarchy in place, and he sort of justified that. So what about the proposition? Do you equate these two sentences?
Are you asking the opposition?
No.
Come on, proposition.
You can answer on behalf of them.
Okay, it's fine. You guys can think till then. We can move
Right.
on to the opposition.
So we'll move on to the opposition. Now,
I wanted to ask at the end of Ayush's speech. I should ask you that.
right. Ainish, you have a question to side proposition?
Yeah, I have a question to Ayush.
Go on.
It's a follow-up question to the answer Ayush gave me prior to this. He's answered that it is better to die, that he believes state-assisted suicide is better than dying in prison, better than having suicide, completely independent suicide surrounded, dying in prison. You do realize that when the state executes you, you are executed in prison, right? That all executions, even if whether it's assisted suicide, it takes place in prison. So there is no difference between assisted suicide or a prisoner killing himself without the consent of the state. So
allow me to step in my capacity as the moderator here and tell you why I will not be accepting this question, because I will not be. Firstly, because you have incorrectly heard and spoken on the basis of what you heard in that answer, because he said that he would rather, and first to fact check, you said that either way they are killed in prison. His point is that when you choose to be executed officially, when you choose for your life to be taken officially, you are given the option for a last meal. You are given the option for your will and testament to be written down if it isn't already, and you are also privately put to sleep with friends and family who you may choose to invite at the period of time in a separate isolated room, maybe in the prison or maybe in a separate facility outside of it. That is the simple procedure when it comes to an inmate being put to rest. That is first. Secondly, why your question does not stand is because what you said is in no way, shape, or form related to what he said. Is because firstly because it is factually wrong, and secondly because that is not what he said, which is why we will not be accepting that question. And after having clarified this with the judges in the chat box, we will be moving forward with the next question. Right. That in mind, is there any question any other question from your side to a side proposition? Right. Fair enough. Ryan or Praneeth, Ryan or Ishan, do either of you have a question to Ainish and Praneeth? Right, Ryan or Ishan? Right. Seeing as there are none, I will take the liberty
Wait,
of
exactly. Yeah.
Right,
You
fair
go
enough.
ahead.
I had interest. I had over the course of this debate, I had the inner capitalist in me really had this question come up. Forgive my animalistic opinion here. However, my question to the side is that, you know, when a prisoner is out of the prison, or whether if the prisoner is dead, they're no longer the prison's responsibility, right? Naturally, because they are either not there to be held responsible, or they are no longer a part of the prison. My question is, if they do sometime during their life sentence decide to say that, okay, you know what, I'm done, end it, right? Don't you think that this is better for the prison system itself, because they would benefit from allowing inmates to choose death, because they get to conserve their resources a bit better. They have more, they can project a better output in the long term. Any either if you can choose to answer.
Yeah. So if that was a concern that the legal system had, that prisons had, then they would simply give out death sentences in place of those life terms, right? It, there's no reason to have the prisoner make that choice. If you're concerned with overcrowding of prisons, then you simply replace the life sentences with death sentences.
Right, fair enough. Thank you for the
Okay.
response. Right.
Small
Yes.
clarification.
Yeah.
And I want this from Ainesh, not from Pranit. I want this from Ainesh. What is the purpose of a prisoner's life, one who has been given a life sentence? What is better than death in a life sentence? And
Depending on the heinousness of the crime, suffering from boredom till you die. Suffering from boredom till you die, having your haunting guilty conscience torture you for the rest of your days, telling you messed up, and now it's your turn to suffer till you die. It's a better punishment than that.
yeah, Ayush, go ahead.
So you want to torture a person. You want to torture and make them feel pain. And by the way, boredom is not the only thing that happens in prison. Just so you know, it's not just mental torture. There's physical torture. There's abuse by guards. There's abuse by prisoners. There's abuse based on race. There's abuse based on gangs. So not only is he getting bored to death, he's being
That's not
abused.
legal. That's not legal. We're talking about the legal parameters set in by prison over here.
So you're just going to turn a blind eye to what goes on in prison just because it's illegal.
Wait, could you rephrase that?
Gangs are illegal as well, but are you going to refute the fact that there are innumerable number of gangs in prisons?
There are gangs, but again,
Are you going to refute that fact?
I'm not refuting that, but gangs
You cannot refute the fact. Then you cannot refute the fact that people are abused in prison.
are
Right. Allow me to step in here. Yes. Ayush, thank you for stepping in finally. And Ainish, before you respond, what Ayush is simply saying is that why don't you disregard the fact that these are the legal parameters and actually argue the real world situation itself, which is that despite the fact that these are the legal parameters, yes, they are. He is not refuting you when you say that. He is asking you, what about the actual situation wherein there is in the real world situation, this is what's actually happening. That is what he's asking you to argue.
fine. In the real world situation, while this is actually happening, Understand that again, why, as Praneeth pointed out, the media has played massively into public fear regarding prison. That the entire dropping the soap bait abused by wardens. Yes, this used to be prevalent, but again, there ever since movies showcasing that and investigative journalists have pointed this out, there has been a massive crackdown, and there is a reason why prison reform is being introduced to prevent corruption and crime within the confines of prison itself. So it has greatly been reduced, and it is being reduced as we speak.
Right. Fair enough.
Wait,
Thank
just
you.
a last clarification.
Right. Go ahead, Ishan.
Anish talked about the Supreme Court. Anish talked about the law. Uh, okay, now tell me. The law says that people cannot drink before the age of 21. But today, 70% of the teenagers in Calcutta are going to canteen, grub and pub, are going to malt, are drinking during pujo. And that is what is happening. They are smoking weed even though it is illegal to do so. Simply supporting the proposition today, what the legal parameters lay down for you are shit. Okay, because the real situation is quite different. It's quite different, which is why we had a huge drive for the legalization of weed, right? Now if you choose to negate the lived experience, and if you choose to go by whatever the law says, you cannot debate on such a motion. So tell me how you debate on the lived experience. We all know the fact, we've seen in movies, definitely. We know for a fact that there are, exactly. So Riyans, stop. Okay,
Yes.
right.
Okay, a second. Okay, but again, I'm going to use the same answer I used before. These things, due to the power of social media and due to the power of internet activism and activism in general, these lived experiences, it is our duty, and these are being curtailed and these are being brought down as we speak. So, would the proposition say that in a perfect prison system, in a system where there is no corruption, there is no beaten up, there is no hazing, there is no racial abuse, there is no violence, the death penalty should, the death sentence, either with consent or without consent, should never be an option in an ideal setup? Would the proposition say that in an ideal prison setup where prisoners prisoners don't have a prisoner's dignity isn't questioned,
Right.
the entire question of the entire
That is indeed a very good question, and I would like the proposition to answer it.
Right. Fair enough. Anyone from the proposition, would you like to respond, or shall we end it there before this turns into more Arnab Goswami?
Unless Ion, my teammate, would like to answer, I think I'm good.
10 and 10.
What?
What did
What
he
did
say?
Ayush say?
I
Would you
need
like to answer?
Answer.
let's simplify here.
Let's
I
end it.
You had a question to the other side, which I'm not sure if it was a rhetoric, but Ishan felt it was a good question. Why don't you repeat it
It was a
for
good
the
question.
benefit of the other
Arey,
side?
it's
so they can
simple.
respond?
It's just 10 words. In the ideal
Yes.
situation where everything is fine, would you still stand by your motion? Will you still stand by your stance? That's it.
Right. Ayush,
Fine. It's fine. If no one
Right,
wants
fair
to
enough.
answer, that's totally fine.
Before this does turn into Arnab Goswami.
Bang
as
on
I mentioned.
answer would be an ideal situation, and India are absolutely, they're absolute opposites, right? Ideal situations are, it's a utopian vision. You cannot debate on those lines.
Right.
It's fine, cool.
Fair
I think
enough.
Ryan and I have come to a decision. So
Fair
yeah,
enough.
you
So before we have to
Yeah.
pander to Arnab Goswami loyalists, we shall wrap up today's debate. Thank you all for joining in. Thank you, Ishan and Ryan, for taking time out of your day to judge today's debate. Of course, thank you to all four of our speakers, Ayush, Ainish, Ion, as well as Praneeth, for joining in today. We shall and before we close for today, we shall have a few words from Ishan and Ryan, who will declare the results, and that's about it. And also let us know which side carried today's debate. I think we should
Ryan,
begin.
please.
Yeah, Ryan, go ahead.
Okay, so today's motion was extremely constructive, uh, given that it's not much debated upon. Prison reform is not really a topic that we come across very often in the school circuit. We debate on things like justice, but not technically on prison reform, and death sentence is also common, but this was a very interesting topic that we debated here today. I think it was very underutilized in the sense that, as Pranit mentioned, no one really uh, picked up on the word choice. And I think choice is a very important word here, as Pranit mentioned and debated today, because today it was very difficult for the proposition to actually come up with very pertinent points, very constructive points. There was an effort to pander to moral grounds and try to come up with a defense. But again, if they could have picked up on the word choice and tried to turn it around in that manner, it would have probably worked better. I understand that there are not many constructive points to be debated from the side of the proposition, but still, I think the opposition carried the motion today. They did a wonderful job. I think uh, they spoke about all the pertinent points, and I'll now hand it over to Ishan, and he'll declare the results.
Right. Uh, so I think, first of all, amazing debate. It was a very constructive debate we saw. I think Ryan would agree. Yes, I think the opposition carried the house today, damn straight, whereas the proposition was, in fact, a bit confused as to what I like to think that a bit confused as to some strong, solid constructives. See, in the school circuit, we have debated on artificial intelligence, material happiness, and the last debate we've been to was about whether parents should have access to their children's social media accounts or not. This was a very uncanny topic that we debated on the legal system, kind of a parliamentary debate. And it's very nice that you guys could debate on this. Your teammate is very nice, right? But just one thing, just if you can't find constructives, try to go on logic. Right? That's what people do. Try to go revolve around logic, start asking questions, etc. And yeah, I think yeah, that's about it. Ayush, for a first timer, you were really good. Uh, you should keep debating if you have to nurture your debating. Ainish, you were pretty good after all the debates you've been to. I still remember his first constructive was about Cold War. Uh, but from there to here, it was good. Oyon, Praneeth, Praneeth is much of my comrade. So I don't know how much I'll be in a position to tell him anything. But yeah, about the results, it would be rather better if Ryan goes ahead with it because Ryan is my senior. He's he should declare the results to come from Ryan. So yeah.
Right. So I'll just announce the first. I'll just announce the best speaker today because there are only four. Or Suryan, should I announce the entire ranking?
No, actually, I announce the entire ranking and tell them why, so we have something so we can help them understand where they went wrong or where they went right.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So fourth is Ayush. Ayush, your points were not that strong. They were good. Do not. It's fine. It's fine. Keep on debating. I think you did extremely well when you were questioning Anish in the end. I think that were some strong pertinent questions, and your marks also increased. I increased some marks there. But coming to your speech, I think there was a lack of logic. Uh, so that is a bit of a problem that you have to focus on. And morality works, definitely works. And today it was a motion that could have been debated on moral grounds as well. But then you have to phrase it in a better manner, and which you did not. But it's fine. It's a difficult motion for the proposition, and you did a good job. Better luck next time. Third is Oyun.
Yeah,
Okay. Right. You can announce.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You can announce the second in.
Right. Okay.
So Oyun, good speech, good points. I think. See, being the first speaker, you had to lay out a few of the parameters on which the debate could have continued, I think you could have done a little better in those terms. Because being the first speaker, the most important job is to make the audience understand what the debate is all about, what are the stakeholders
Gambit of
involved.
the motion and the
Yes,
stance.
and which actually very interestingly Praneeth did at the very end. So I kind of wanted that from you, so that the debate could have moved on more smoothly. But yeah, it was a good speech. Good luck for future debates.
Thank
Over
you.
to Ishan.
Second, today we have Ainish Dutt because it's pretty simple. So both the opposition speakers are first and second, and that simply says how the opposition carried the motion today. But why Ainish lost out by a good margin from Praneeth was exactly what Ryan said. Praneeth at the very end came and established certain parameters which should have been established by the previous speakers. Ainish, your speech was good. Certain grave logical fallacies which you made. A question that was completely illogical, which I think Suryansh took into notice. I think those are the parts where you lost. I don't work on those parts. Try to work on logical correctness. Other than that, your speaking style, your points, they were good. Could have been better. You could have brought in better legal stances rather than just saying that it is the state that is responsible. You were saying that throughout your speech. But yeah, I think it was you debated well. And of course, for first position we have Praneeth Sinha Roy. I think that is his full name. Praneeth. Praneeth is undisputed best of the circuit right now.
No.
See,
Yeah.
Praneeth is
To
Praneeth.
say, for me, I think Ryan can tell him uh, how
No,
he
actually,
was.
actually,
I think for me,
I have debated with Praneeth. I think
we
2 or 3
have
times.
all debated with Praneeth.
And he has been the thing about you that is that you have been improving day by day. Like even today when I heard you, it was more of a parliamentary discussion that we were having, and you definitely improved from the last time. I think I was the judge, and Kamal Kohli and I,
Yeah, yeah.
we were the judges, and you had come first. Definitely, like you are improving day by day, and that's such a great thing to see. And I will not say anything more.
Just one
Just
last thing.
that,
Just 30 seconds. Today we did not mark you, any one of you, on fluency, diction, style, etc. But like if this was a school debate, probably all of you would have lost because diction and humor and etc. are very important
Yeah.
things that debating entails. But yeah, today was more of a parliamentary debate. So this is a shout out to Suryansh Vasu Malik to make the Florisiers debates parliamentary style debates from now on. Right?
Right.
So
Right. So
it
only
was a
one
good debate.
comment for Pranit. You have to manage your time a little. I think your time management has to be worked out
Yeah, I agree.
because I could not have marked the constructives which came in those 26 seconds, but I still did because it was a great point. But yeah, that's about it. But still, I get your point because you had to lay down the parameters as well because the previous speakers did not. So you lost out time when you were focusing on the constructives. But yeah, something to just keep in mind.
Right, fair enough. Thank you very much, Ryan, and thank you all for joining in. And to your point, Ishan, yes, I shall not be rather dictatorial in my actions, and I shall try to make sure we can bring in some more parliamentary features into this debate, and hopefully we can do that next time or sometime after. With that, thank you all for joining in. This was another debate of the floor is yours. Congratulations to the lot of you, and I hope you can take back and build upon the advice that Ryan and Ishan gave you so well. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you from my side. And yeah, that's what that was.